All right. Welcome to the Progression Health Podcast, episode 8. I'm here with PAK. So that's an abbreviation for his full name. He's from Greece, and my Greek pronunciation isn't as good as I'd like it to be. So I'll let PAK introduce himself, and we'll kick off the podcast from there.
Perfect. Yes, my full name is Patroklos Androulakis-Korakakis, but everybody calls me PAK, including my Greek friends. And that's been my nickname for a while. And it's a name that is very intimidating to the eye, but when you actually try to pronounce it, most people will find that it's relatively easy. But that said, PAK is totally fine, and that's what I go by. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Right, yeah. You remind me actually of, Benjamin Pukulski, the Canadian bodybuilder.
The fake PAK.
The fake PAK. We have the real PAK now. He's actually been in the trenches and done the research. Maybe you could combine, and he would have the practical experience, and you would have the theoretical, something like that. But
No, I remember seeing Ben Pukulski being referred to as PAK, and I remember thinking, hey, that's my name. But no, in all seriousness, I bet there's plenty of PAKs out there.
Yeah, exactly. So this PAK, tell us a little bit about like who you are. I know you worked with SPSS, which is Shredded by Science. So really like top organization and resource for anyone in the health and fitness industry. And obviously you've done research, you have a PhD. So just tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up in England as well.
For sure. So I'm currently a coach at Stronger by Science, strongerbyscience.com. As you said, great resource for lifters and for people that are interested in understanding the why behind a lot of behind anything lifting and nutrition in the context of lifting related. I just finished my PhD at the University of Solent here in Southampton, England, where I studied the minimum effective training dose for 1 repetition maximum strength in powerlifters. Essentially, what is the least a powerlifter needs to do to get stronger? I investigated the concept as a whole rather than trying to identify a specific dose or find the dose, like the amount of sets and reps, etc. And aside from being a coach at Stronger by Science, I am also a lecturer here at the University of Solent, where I teach various sports science related subjects, including research methods in the context of sports science. And at the same time, I have also been involved in an R&D sort of job in a non-sports science environment. And that said, my research focuses around strength, hypertrophy, as well as strength sports and understanding characteristics of strength sport athletes. And I just like researching stuff that I, as a lifter and other lifters, find useful and interesting. So I do not make my living directly, at least, off my research. So I do not, I do projects that I like, that I enjoy, and that I think the lifting community will benefit from. So I don't publish as much as other academics. It may be 3 to 5 papers per year or so. And to answer your question about when me being in England, I left Greece when I was 12. So I was born in Athens, Greece. Left Greece when I was 12, moved to Germany, near the border with Switzerland. Had a very small town, lived there for 7 years or so, lived in Munich as well for a year, and then moved to the UK, England, and Southampton specifically to pursue my bachelor's degree, which was in fitness and personal training, which essentially is sports science plus some practical components. So that was a Bachelor of Science in that. And from that, I got into research, started publishing, did a few research projects, and then started my PhD directly. So I didn't do the usual BSc, MSc, PhD, or BA, MA, whatever. And that's me. Currently in Southampton, as you can see, with the leftovers from the pandemic, there are barbells in my office because that's what I used to train. And yeah, that's me, I guess.
Very interesting. Great. So you've got a nice mix of experience across your background. It's brilliant. So you've done a PhD. Would you recommend doing a PhD to people who are interested in research and academia, or would you recommend a master's, or just what are your thoughts on that? Because I think it's a great route, but I haven't done a PhD myself.
So I think that I was fortunate enough to be able to do a self-funded PhD. That was great. The fact that I could go down that route, which allowed me to select my topic with more flexibility. Obviously, it's not like, hey, do a self-funded PhD and you can do it in whatever completely. Obviously, there needs to be some agreement from the university and your supervisors. And I was fortunate enough to have a great supervisory team. My main supervisor was Dr. James Steele, aka James, and then after James was the other James Fisher, Dr. James Fisher, also James. So I was fortunate enough to have a really nice setup for my PhD, which is not often the case with everyone. Not saying it from getting a bad supervisor sort of perspective, but if you are doing a PhD that is not self-funded, you may find yourself studying something that you are interested in, but not extremely super 100% in it from the get-go, which can be a bit of a pain as you reach those final months or final year of your PhD, where things intensify and you're already there for 2 to 5 years, depending on whether you're doing it part-time or full-time. So if research is something that you want to do, and academia and being involved in academia is something that you want, a PhD, I think, is almost essential. But at the same time, if you do not want to become a researcher per se, or you don't want to be involved in academia at that level, doing research and becoming a professor, et cetera, you don't need to do a PhD, and it might be best for some people. I know that there is, somewhat of a prestige or a certain, status attributed to a PhD, but at the same time, the cost and the effort and the time commitment and the potential, the opportunities that you might miss out on by doing a PhD, if you're a practitioner and somebody who does not want to do research, I think these are all things that you need to consider. You may be much better off doing a master's, which will still allow you to, do research. You have to do a thesis, at least in most UK universities. So you will have to do that. And in sports science, I'm not sure about other disciplines. So you will still do research. You can still be involved in research projects in your university and meet people and say, hey, I do want to do some research, not recreationally, but not become a researcher, and still have plenty of time available to pursue your actual career and practice whatever it is you want to practice. And if you do a PhD, it's important that you understand what that entails and what you're going to get out of it. So for me personally, even though I'm not going to become, or at least for the time being, not going to be a researcher in terms of my profession, the PhD does help with the coaching side of things. So, it does allow me, because I'm not an elite lifter or shredded, it does allow for some further credibility. Obviously, the last point was jokingly mentioned. And I do want to pursue a career in academia to a certain extent, maybe just as a lecturer, which I'm currently doing as well. But yeah, there are other perks to it depending on your overall setup. But I would urge everyone to have a serious thing about it. Consider the timelines, consider the effort, the money, and the university policies, and so on and so forth. Because just jumping into a PhD can backfire, especially midway, where you start realizing that maybe this is not what I want to do, or I'd rather be working full time, than doing this, or I'm not really that interested in it. How will it benefit me? It's not that it will open as many doors as some people think. That was it.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's funny, yeah, you touch on you're not shredded or whatever, and it's like you have like, you know, you couldn't have more credibility than a PhD, especially like in the fitness industry, especially the study you've done, the minimum effective training dose. But someone with abs or with a cool Instagram profile might get more, you know, of have more reach based on such like a superficial sort of approach to health and fitness, which is completely backward, but that's the way things are. And here we're here talking about the science, so that's, you know, we're spreading the good word.
I think as practitioners, it's important to have some sort of balance. So obviously, you know, the being shredded was a joking comment, and that's something that I could potentially do if I wanted. Well, not be shredded as like a bodybuilder, but get the picture with the abs. But at the same time, I do believe that in the field of sport science, and in our particular field of strength and hypertrophy, walking the walk to a certain extent. Not saying you need to be a bodybuilder or a powerlifter, but engaging in some sort of training and being in the trenches in that sense does make things better and does give you some actual credibility if you combine that with your academic credentials and your, you know, knowledge, et cetera, et cetera. So just being, if I was to just have a PhD and not have the coaching experience and the personal experience being in the gym and lifting and competing and stuff, I think that would still, that wouldn't allow me to have a complete profile, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it'll do anyone in the health and fitness industry no harm to be the best kind of like coach, but also like practitioner that they can be. So however strong they can be with their time and their resources, you know, that's great for them. And if they're not shredded, that's completely fine as well. And then also trying to have a blend of the research and the science will put them, you know, in a really good place to be well-rounded and work with lots of people, because not enough people exercise, and we're really trying to get people to be healthier. So just kind of touching back on the fitness industry, what do you think is the importance of science in the fitness industry? And then obviously with SBSS, you do a lot of science work. So what's the kind of the work that you do there?
So just to clarify, with SBS and my work there, I work there strictly as a coach and coach clients. So I do not produce any content or have any. I'm not part of the SBS team. I'm part of the SBS coaching team. Just for clarification. So I believe that science, of course, has a place in our field. I mean, it would be funny if I said it doesn't, but I think it's also important to understand science and understand what science is really trying to achieve here. Something that is often being, you know, misunderstood by not only practitioners, but sometimes it seems that even some scientists themselves kind of lose track because of all the politics and the social media, etc. So we are trying to get closer to the truth here and understand the why behind things. But at the same time, in order to do so, we must remain cautious, open-minded, and be willing to change our stances and positions and not be too dogmatic. So I believe that science, especially for you know, hypertrophy and strength, will allow us to better understand how to do things, how to optimize, what works, what doesn't. But in order to do so, we have to approach science and treat science in an appropriate manner. So just, you know, taking limited evidence and presenting it in a very fancy and absolute, you know, way to get views or to bring people or to show how, oh yeah, we're scientists, we're PhDs, we're this, we're that, I think can sometimes do more harm than good. And at the same time, I'm not fully on board with the other extreme of, oh yeah, what the scientists know, it's very limited, it's very this, it's very that, it's all about your experience in the field. So science and experience together combined, especially in the context that we're speaking of, can allow us to start understanding things better. I lost my train of thought there during the end of that sentence, because this is something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, how there seems to be this sort of schism between practitioners and scientists, where it's either one extreme or the other, when in reality we can learn from the field, and obviously using sound scientific principles, take that experience, take the scientific data available, combine those, and then have a truly evidence-based approach to things. But yeah, science is extremely important to what we're trying to do, but at the same time, its limitations and its limitations need to be recognized. Obviously, that will depend on the topic and what we're talking about.
Yeah, I like what you said there about having an evidence-based approach. So that evidence could come from your own personal experience, from working with clients, and then also from research. And you kind of weight it accordingly, depending on how much evidence there is and how much experience you have. So speaking of working with clients, can you just talk a little bit about coaching? I feel like coaching is like one of the most underutilized things nowadays. We're kind of like going into like a digital age where we're using a lot more computers, a lot more than we have before. And there's a lot of potential to help, improve our health. For example, I have like a Fitbit on here, and, how many people have a Fitbit, but they don't know how to use it, So it's like, if we can get coaching from more experienced people, especially when a lot of people, they get their source information from poor sources. Like there's so much misinformation out there. What do you think is the value of coaching? And can you just speak about your coaching as well?
Yeah. So, and just a side note again, strongerbyscience.com, the coaching that is offered there is not that there's a team of coaches, and it's not that there's a team of great coaches and people specializing in different areas. If anybody's interested, it's not just myself, and we can have a look and see if that's something that can potentially interest them. That said, I think coaching is something that can be of great benefit for people that want to not only be held accountable and stick to a particular training program or nutrition plan, but also to better understand why, how and why they can progress and get better, not only in the gym, but also improve certain dietary habits and overall habits that may further enhance their training performance or the physique development or whatever. I think I'm not sure if it's underutilized or overutilized. I haven't looked at any of the data, and I'm only speaking from personal experience. But I do find that, again, even in coaching, there are people that do not do coaching justice because they don't deliver a service that is thorough enough, and they sort of use coaching as an excuse as a way of making some quick money and producing or sending clients training templates that are not highly individualized, as well as not engaging in frequent conversation with those clients. I believe that coaching, it's not that let's take nutrition, for example. It's not that I possess some sort of magical macronutrient calculator or calorie deficit calculator or calorie surplus calculator that you can't find online by yourself. But having that second set of eyes on your trend weight, or how things are progressing outside the gym and inside the gym based on how much you eat, and adjustments made every week, as well as the accountability factor, can help one reach their goals reach their goals, period. But that obviously depends on thorough communication, on establishing and developing that relationship between coach and client, and being, I don't want to say mentor, but being a coach, actually. Being a coach beyond just the numbers and hey, 300 grams of carbs, 70 grams of fat, 180 grams of protein, X amount of calories. And I think that that's something that is not done by a lot of coaches, which on one hand I understand from a time availability perspective, but at the same time, I think it's doing a disservice to the people that do take the profession seriously and provide a thorough service. Because as you said, many people will utilize and leverage their credentials or marketing to offer services presented as coaching. But in practice, they don't really reflect what an actual coach should do. Now, for training, I do think that things do get a bit more complicated, and the coach's input can be really really beneficial for somebody, especially if they are lost in terms of direction. We live in an era where there's plenty of free templates available. You can go to liftvault.com, download 150 different hypertrophy or strength programs. You can plug your numbers in, and there you go. Here's your training. But often people find that they are stuck or don't know exactly how to progress because there's so much information, so many different progression patterns, periodizations, schemes, and ways to do things where they kind of feel lost. And that's where a coach can come in, not only help you get to that PR or get to that total that you want, but also teach you along the way of, hey, this is how things are being adjusted every week. You had a week that was harder because of exogenous stress. All right, we will adjust this and this and that. Find what works, what doesn't, depending obviously on other variables too, and leave you at some point to be on your own after you finish your collaboration. Because most people at some point will stop coaching. I do have clients that I've worked with for years, for like 3 years plus, and other clients where we work together for 3 to 6 months. And after that, they're able to, continue, and for whatever reason, even if they've made amazing progress, but then take it and just continue on their own because they've learned through that process. And yeah, I think coaching can definitely benefit people that are feeling lost or are not sure on how they can progress, and they can learn from that process, but also advanced lifters. So there does come a point where some cookie cutter templates may not cut it for you. Or you may have to, you may not be able to do your own programming because of other factors. I am guilty of that myself. When I coach myself, there are times where I'll make the wrong calls because of emotional reasons. I might say, hey, I'll go for that extra set, even though I shouldn't go for that extra set, or I will try and lift X amount of weight, even though I'll be, at the top range of the RPEs that I should be aiming for. And having a coach there can take that thinking away from you, and by placing your trust on another person, you can mitigate some of those issues, as well as have a second set of eyes, more analytical set of eyes on your training. But well, not necessarily more analytical, but a different sort of set of eyes that could be as analytical, but coming from a different perspective. That may allow you to see that, I hadn't thought of trying this and that, and potentially implementing a specific training technique or doing things differently, which as an advanced lifter could make a lot of difference and can take some of that pressure away from you, especially if you're preparing for a competition. That was a rant response. I hope I covered you there.
Yeah, no, all good. And I can cover you. Progression Health is taking on clients, so if you need coaching, Pak, I got you. No, I'm joking. But so I actually really value coaching myself and also helping other clients, because a big thing I see is there's so many misconceptions and like myths in the health and fitness industry. I'm not sure why, but I love when a client comes up with like, what about this detox tea, or what about German volume training, and it's like, okay, let's go back to the principles here. Let's go back to the basics. And then also a post I saw recently on Instagram was really cool. It was like, as a coach, your job is not to make decisions. You're essentially the advisor to the president. The client is the president, and you just advise them and you say, here's the consequence of this decision. Here's the consequence of this decision. You decide for yourself, and I'll support you with whatever decision you make. I really like that idea, because it takes a lot of pressure off the coach to produce results, because ultimately it's the client who does the work. We kind of, just like you said, we kind of mentor and I guess collaborate, and then give them a second set of ears and eyes and an analytical view of what they're going through, because to change your health is really challenging. So I have a nutrition coach, and yeah, it helps me a lot.
Yeah, and that's one thing I stress to all clients. I love geeking out and getting people stronger and bigger and leaner. I like being the guy behind the scenes that helps and make adjustments to help them get them there. But a lot of it also depends. A lot of the progress depends on the feedback and the communication. So I try to speak with most clients daily, obviously not on the phone, but via text and via voice messages. And aside from instead of doing a weekly check-in, seeing how the week went, I prefer speaking to clients as much as possible, obviously within reason, to not only get feedback from daily sessions, but to get to know them better as people, and then understand how the sessions went, what else might have affected their performance or nutrition, which then makes my the ability to do my job increases the ability of makes my job better. I don't know why I try to say it in a fancy way, but yeah, it helps me do things the right way, at least the way that I do the right way. So it's really a back and forth. It's not that if your coach comes up to you and presents himself as the almighty guru that has the answers, and here's the answer, and don't deviate from this, and don't discuss it, and this is 5 reps, 3 sets, X amount of weight, no questions asked, this particular exercise, then you might need to look somewhere else. Obviously, there is your coach must have some sort of a certain level, not of authority, but should provide you with clear cut directions. Obviously, be open to listen to your feedback and make adjustments. But if you have the other extreme where the coach just says, "Hey, just which exercises do you like? Do those," and we're good. Then that might be a bit too relaxed.
Yeah, I like that approach. You're thorough and very supportive and available regularly. That's invaluable, especially when someone's starting out in coaching or they're going through a particularly challenging time. That support can be so useful. So speaking of your coaching, you had one client, Nick, who was competing in the British Masters. This can tie in nicely with the whole reason that we're here today to talk about your research and the minimum effective training dose. So I think that's a really good example. Could you talk a little bit about that? And I saw some of the training he was doing, and it's like, no, you can't get strong. That's not enough. That's too little. But yeah, he won, right? Or he performed very well with that approach.
He won, and he still. So just a bit of background. Nick was a friend now, also based in Southampton. Somebody I got to know before being coach for Stronger by Science, just for the record. And somebody who I personally met at the gym here, and he is a guy who at the time weighed 115 kilos. So that's around. I can tell you exactly, around 250 pounds. And he was a guy that I kept seeing at the gym, like quite big, quite thick upper back, big arms. And I kept seeing him deadlifting. And I saw that he was able to pull near 300. He was pulling near 300 kilos a few times, but he didn't seem like he knew what he was doing, if that makes sense. He was pulling the weight and with relatively okay looking form, nothing looked extremely weird. But at the same time, he wasn't bracing, he didn't have a belt, or he was grabbing the weight and just lifting it off the ground. So we got to talking, and I said, hey, potentially we can work together. You can try powerlifting. He was squatting at the time, but he was squatting with the little pad on the bar, not depth. Again, nothing too bad, but I was like, there's a lot of potential there. And his bench at the time was near 160 kilos, just touch and go. And we started working together, and just by working on his technique and doing specific training to powerlifting, 2 years later, we competed both in Northern Ireland and then in England. And he came British champion twice for the M1s, for the 120 class M1s, but he currently holds the British record for the deadlift at 340 kilos at 46 years old for the M1 120 class. So if you go on British, that's for the IPF affiliate of the UK. If you go to BritishPowerlifting.org or whatever their website is, the record still stands. And he did, as a guy who was barely squatting to depth and using the pad and all that stuff, he squatted 280 kilos in comp, quite low and quite easy as well. So he had 300 on that day, but we were building. He also holds the total record. I forgot that. So we were building towards the total record. So the attempts were conservative for squat and bench. So he did squat 280 and bench 190, also comfortably. Then proceeded to bench 200 kilos the week after in the gym. And then broke his own record on his second attempt on the deadlift and the total record, and then got 340 as a third one as a sort of a bonus PR and record. Now, the reason I'm mentioning this is to highlight that he is somebody who works as a bus driver and does long shifts, 10, 12-hour shifts, obviously including breaks, etc. And there were weeks where he was coming to the gym after those shifts, late at night, 9, 10 p.m., with the next day being 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. wake-up time day. And we had to make sure that we adjusted training to not only fit his anthropometric characteristics, meaning that, he was a heavy guy, not, in his 20s, heavy, a lot of muscle, and at the same time, limited recovery capabilities. So we needed to find a way for him to progress and get better on the power lifts while also allowing for sufficient recovery and not just saying, hey, we will now hammer you with training volume, because that's what we should do. And you pulled up, I saw on the document for this episode, you pulled up the link from Instagram, and I was like, wow, you did a lot of scrolling there. But that's great, because I can now look at it and say, like, during his 10-week prep. So the prep before, that was the first British nationals that he did, where he won again. He was doing so weekly, an average of 4 working sets for the squat, 6 working sets for the bench press, and 3 working sets for the deadlift, at an average load, like percentage of 1RM, being 85 to 86%. And squatted once a week, deadlifted once a week, and bench pressed twice a week. And still managed to not only, so he increased his total from that year. That year he hit a 770 total. And then the next year he increased his total training in a similar fashion. So he was already an elite lifter. And he managed to hit an 805 total, which is the current record for his weight class and age category, by doing, a similar style of training. And and again, it's noteworthy also that he was not a full 120 kilo lifter. He weighed in at 116 kilos without any water cuts or anything. He was eating. He had breakfast before weigh-ins. So that's, I think, also noteworthy. Big shout out to Nick. Big love to Nick. Really good friend. And I'm actually hoping to see him soon.
Amazing, yeah. So that actually just is a testament to the power of coaching and your coaching ability. PAK the champion maker.
It's mostly the athlete. I'm happy to have helped and have been there to do some of the behind the scene thinking. But Nick showing up, and every athlete showing up to every session after work. I was there at the gym with him sometimes, but going to the gym after 10 p.m., being sat all day on a bus and loading 250 plus kilos on a bar and squatting it does take some guts to keep it PG.
Absolutely, yeah. It's like, as a coach, you're more, it's the kind of it's more like a friendship almost. You never do the work for somebody, but you're always there when they need that support or guidance or just maybe even motivation sometimes. Yeah, and then you can get amazing results like that when you really work effectively together. So for somebody who isn't a powerlifter or who's interested in powerlifting or just isn't as advanced as someone like Nick, how could they apply the minimum effective training dose to their own training? What would be like a kind of an effective way to start using it?
Little correction, it was 810 kilos, not 805. So I just saw that I loaded that up. And I'd say that for somebody who's not a powerlifter, and obviously the majority of people that you may work with, and a lot of the people that I work with are not competitive powerlifters. And the concept of the minimum effective training dose, what's the least you can do and still make progress, I think is still a useful concept for them too, even though my PhD was, at least part of my PhD was specifically on powerlifters. Now, I would like to point out that it will be goal dependent. So, if you're looking to get bigger or get stronger or both, that will obviously alter the dosing or, the type of dose or the amount rather of what's the minimum or what's the least you can do and still make progress. But I'd say I want to promote the concept rather than say, hey, do X amount of sets and reps for people that may not be powerlifters, but they're doing less than you can potentially, doing less than what's optimal can sometimes actually be considered better for your overall progress. And again, it's if you're unable to, if you're not sleeping well, or if you don't have a lot of time available, or working hard and stress is high, forcing those long training sessions or attempting to do those longer training sessions and failing and then feeling as if you're missing out on gains, maybe it can backfire. So I just want to promote the fact that, hey, we've done some research and we have found that you can still make progress and get stronger, at least by doing much little than people originally thought. And we did that research in powerlifters who are, if anything, less prone to huge increases in strength. So if they can improve doing just a few heavy sets per week, then you, average person who just wants to be fit, big, and strong for general health purposes and doesn't want to be Mr. Olympia, you can probably do so as well. So as part of the project, we did a literature review and essentially looked at the literature and tried to find out what the current available scientific evidence has to say about the topic, and saw that for recreationally trained individuals, so not powerlifters, doing a single set of 6 to 12 repetitions 2 to 3 times per week per lift, using 70 to 85% of 1RM. So a load that is relatively heavy and going close or to muscular failure can result in significant strength increases. And based on the literature that we already have, we know that single sets can also be failure, can also be beneficial for muscle hypertrophy. Now, again, keep in mind that we're not talking about what's optimal here or what's the most you could do and get the most, progress, but you can still make meaningful, either that you can still make meaningful progress by doing just a few hard sets per week per lift. And there's actually a study that we are currently trying to publish. It's published as a preprint where it was spearheaded by James Steele. And we looked at the data from a chain of gyms over in the Netherlands. They have gyms in the UK as well, and other countries called Fit 20, where their whole thing is that you do a 20-minute workout at the gym with a personal trainer guiding you through the workout, but you do 20 minutes per week. That's it. So that we're not talking about minimum dose here. We're talking about ultra minimum-est of doses, like as little as possible. And what they do is they do 6 exercises, 1 set each 4 to 6 repetitions with a controlled tempo to failure on specific machines. And we had data for around 6,000 participants from those gyms, and saw that even with 20 minutes per week of focused, close to failure training, these people were able to make meaningful strength increases for over a year, after which they started plateauing, but they were still training upwards. But it's important to note that we're talking about 20 minutes a week. So even that was still able to do something. Now, if you're a highly advanced trainee, or you're somebody who's been lifting for years, make sure you do more than 20 minutes a week. Do a couple of 2 to 3 sessions, 30 minutes or so each. Have a few single sets that are hard enough, 5 to 10, 5 to 15 repetitions, and you'll still be able to make a meaningful progress, at least for 6 to 12 weeks. So I think that's really important for people to know, not necessarily implement unless they need to, but there will come a time where you will go on holiday, or you'll enroll in university, or you'll get a new job, or you'll have a kid. Instead of freaking out and saying, "Oh, I don't have time for my 6 sessions or 5 or 4 2-hour sessions per week," you can remind yourself that, hey, there's data out there to show that even with a few hard sets, I can still not only maintain my muscle mass and strength, but also I might also increase my strength and muscle mass. So getting the concept out there it's more important to me than saying, hey, we managed to give you specific, exact guidelines. I gave some rough guidelines, and some ranges, but the idea that, hey, you can still make progress doing less than what's optimal is important.
That's amazing. Yeah. So something I see with a lot of people is they have like this black and white approach to just their thinking in general. And I think the more flexible you are with your health, so your nutrition and your training, the more progress you can make. If you have a kid, if you get a new job, if you do a PhD and you can only do 20 minutes, do your 20 minutes and make the most of it. If you have 2 hours, make the most of that as well. I guess it feels like the overarching point is to be just, as efficient as possible with whatever time you have to make the most progress you can. And it's interesting as well. A question I get a lot as a personal trainer is, how often do I need to train? And I'm always like, 2 sessions a week done right is a lot for most people. Of course, for intermediate, advanced, elite lifters, they might need to do more, but 2 is great. So the fact that you have research that 20 minutes a week is effective is like amazing. That's like, I nearly want to go and try that myself and just see what could I do if I just gave myself 20 minutes. What progress could I make, or could I even just maintain for a couple of months and put that time into maybe like nutrition or something else? So that's really interesting.
I'll send you the preprint. So this is publicly available as a preprint. It hasn't. It's going through peer review now, and yeah, I'll send you the preprint so you can potentially link it down. So that there is a full text available with the analysis, with all that data. So it's not just me saying, "Hey, we did something." It's somewhere there. But I wanted to mention that as part of the PhD, there was a survey where we talked with powerlifters about their previous experience with minimum dose training, and only 36% had actually engaged in such an approach. But like the rest, the near 70% that had not engaged in minimum dose training, when asked why, they said, I'm afraid of not making enough progress, of potentially losing strength. But when they were asked if they would be willing to try such an approach, if there was more evidence around it, more data around it, they were all very, the 98% or 99% of those that hadn't experimented with the minimum dose approach before said that, yeah, if there was more evidence around it, I'd be happy to. And now there is some more evidence. There's obviously a long way to go to explore the concept fully, but there's some evidence to hint that, hey, you can do less and make progress.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of like, I think it's like the Pareto principle. It's like the 80-20 rule. 20% of what you do gets you kind of like 80% of the results. So if you could just find out what are the most effective sets you need to do in your session, you could focus on them, save a lot of time. But you have to be open to that. There'll be trial and error with that as well. So currently myself, I'm training for a half marathon, going completely the opposite way. And I'm trying to stay powerlifting so that I'm in a position to do a competition at some point next year. How do you think running or kind of cardiovascular work would affect strength training? How would you kind of fit those two together? Do you have an experience with that? And where does kind of the minimum effective dose fit in with cardio work outside the gym?
So well, I'll make a brief note about myself. Personally, I like walking a lot. I walk a lot. I'm not obviously a competitive walker, but I walk an average of 12 to 15,000 steps a day for the past years. I don't drive at the moment, at least. And so I walk everywhere, walk or cycle. And I think that some sort of cardiovascular training, not necessarily aerobic fitness specific training, can be beneficial for lifters and for people who want to get bigger and stronger, because being healthy is important to the journey of becoming bigger and stronger. That said, I do work with a few clients that do. Like I have a client who is getting stronger and bigger, but at the same time does like 130 kilometers of running a week, and some crazy stuff like that. And or maybe maybe that was one of the extreme weeks, but has like an average step count of like over 40K steps a day, including running and walking, and moving around, and so that's somebody on the other extreme of the spectrum. So I'd say that you can definitely combine, running or aerobic fitness focused training, with powerlifting and with strength training. But there may be a few variables from both the nutrition and the training side that you will need to optimize. And I'd say one is if you can separate your sessions. So if you can have training with, you're lifting on a separate day in comparison to your aerobic training, that would be a good first step. And adjusting, so that's where minimum dose approach may be coming handy. So if you're now focusing, if I assume that the half marathon is sort of a priority at the moment, right? But at the same time, you don't want to lose, your strength. So you can focus your recovery capabilities. You can allocate some of those, your resources, let's say recovery resources. You can allocate those to your running and say, okay, I will now do a minimum dose. I will adopt a minimum dose approach for the squat and the deadlift for my lower body, where the running will obviously affect that, and you can do your specific high load, single or 1 to 3 repetition work there, just enough for you to still make progress, but without it being super fatiguing to the point where it's taken away from the running. But such an approach would still allow you to make progress, some progress at least. Definitely maintain, would definitely most likely maintain, and still allow you to not optimize fully, but take your running training, a level higher. And you could potentially do a bit more on your upper body, still using a sort of a minimum dose approach, but potentially doing a bit more because you won't have to deal with the soreness and having you don't want to be doing sets of 10 and 15 on squats multiple times a week, and then running 3 to 5 times a week too. And that was something cool that we found in our studies with powerlifters, where they were doing mostly heavy single repetitions. So they were doing, for the squat, 2 single repetitions a week, and the other group was doing 2 singles a week plus 2 sets of 3. After those single repetitions, and their soreness scores were extremely low. So after doing such type of training, even though it was potent enough to yield some increases in strength, and some meaningful increases in strength, it wasn't hard enough to make them sore because there wasn't a lot of volume, and as a result, they were scoring like zeros and ones on a 6-point scale for muscle soreness. So for you specifically, doing singles and back of sets, so doing a single on the squat and then 2 sets of 3 after that single, using 80% of whatever you used for the single. So hitting, so doing a single at, let's say, RP 9 to 9.5, and then taking a percentage of that and doing a couple of back of sets for further practice can allow you to still make progress, but also not wake up the next day and be unable to do your running and progressively increase your running training to compete in the half marathon. So that was a great example actually that you brought, and that's a great way to show how a minimal dose approach can fit into somebody's training plan, because there's many people that will that get into training and lifting recreationally that often pick up other physical activities. So like some people may start doing a martial art, or pick up cycling or swimming or playing a sport. And being able to know that, now I've been lifting for 5 years. I've finally hit my 4-plate squat goal. Now I want to start BJJ, or I want to play a bit more basketball with the guys, 3 times a week. How will I fit the 2-hour training sessions in? Like, you don't necessarily need to. You could turn it down a bit for your lifting work, but by doing a few hard sets and making sure that those sets are hard enough, and maybe some back and forth as well, you can still make some meaningful progress, albeit not optimal, and still focus on whatever else you need to focus on. And as I mentioned, nutrition as well at the beginning. So nutritionally, I'd say if there's another sport involved, and especially if you're talking about a sport that is different in nature, and the energy system is involved, and the recovery, et cetera, and the length of the sport, optimizing things on that end and potentially allocating your carbohydrates differently throughout the day would be important. But I'm not going to get into that with too much.
Yeah,
a lot of talking.
We could really go into, a huge different episode on nutrition as well. But that was amazing. And just some things I'm thinking of for clients is, like, even if you are someone who works a sedentary job, like at a computer, or like a bus driver like Nick, you can still, make progress. It's like, it's all about planning, really. Or if you're a runner who does 40,000 steps a day, you can still build muscle. You can do so many things with the proper plan. It's amazing. It's just, I think you have to be kind of open-minded to it, not be dogmatic, not be like thinking, oh, it's all or nothing, or black and white thinking. And then you can really, be flexible. And if you're willing to sacrifice a little bit of, like, we'll say, optimality, or, how optimal your training is for just to progress, you can do so many things with your health. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just getting people off the train that unless I do the best, whatever, the most voluminous and the most specialized program, I won't make progress. That's not necessarily true. And actually, in your specific example, if you were trying to still force really high volume training sessions, I'm not saying it would happen for certain, but there's a high chance that you would not be able to sufficiently recover from the lifting because of the running, and from the running because of the lifting. That makes sense. Like, if you were trying to push both things together, one would affect the other negatively, and you would kind of either, you could potentially get injured, or just burn out, or not make any meaningful progress in either department. That's not said with certainty, but I know it will always depend on other factors as well, experience, etc., PEDs, this, that, the other. But it's a good example of where taking a step backwards might be 2 steps forwards.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm young and I have loads of years ahead of me. So just because I'm currently focusing on the running doesn't mean that I can't make strength gains or hypertrophy gains later on down the line. Right now, I'm just maintaining maybe I'll make a little bit of progress. And actually, it's very interesting. I'm enjoying my training more because there's less pressure on progressing. I'm just maintaining with the workouts, and then the running I'm trying to progress. So I guess we're kind of talking about periodizing your training, and that's, how that can be very, very useful. You just mentioned injuries. So something I was thinking of for somebody to try and apply this, where does injuries come into it? Because, or sorry, not injuries, but like avoiding injuries, because you're trying to progress, you're trying to go heavy, but technique is also very important to reduce the risk of injury. So would you talk a little bit about that and how to avoid getting injured, and then how to maintain your technique?
So I would say that I'd urge everybody to watch. There's a debate that happened recently between Greg Lehman and Andrew Locke. So if they YouTube Greg, Greg space Lehman, Lehman, and low back pain, they can see a nice debate on lifting technique and low back pain specifically, where there's more than just a discussion, it's a bit of a freak show, but there are some nice points made by Greg on lifting technique and how much it actually affects low back pain and low back injuries. But I want to say that a minimum effective training dose approach may, and this is not said with certainty, may be beneficial for injuries in the context of, still making progress while having limited recovery resources available. But if, as a power lifter, the studies that we did were all very heavy load studies that were very low in volume, but they still utilized, heavy weights. People were doing a single repetitions that was near maximal. So I wanted to point out that if a lifter is not used to handling heavy weights, jumping, starting a minimum effective dose approach and saying, okay, I read the study by PAK, and now I'm going to start doing singles and back offsets to not get injured. If they don't have a lot of experience, that can potentially backfire. But for athletes who are used to handling heavy loads, and they come across a period in their life where recovery resources are very limited, and not doing as much volume may be beneficial for the training injury, for training related injuries. But that said, with a lot of caution in terms of the supply and not a lot of certainty from my part. So it's not that we studied injuries or whatever, but it may be that, hey, doing one heavy set instead of 5 heavy sets might make it less likely that you get injured. But in terms of the supply, so I don't feel comfortable saying a lot about training injury and technique as well, because it's not. It is my department from a coaching perspective, but still, I don't feel that that's sufficient enough for me to comment on how important lifting technique is for injury. Consistent lifting technique, I think, is important to avoid injury. Now, whether it's good, bad, or whatever, I think that's a difficult topic. But again, if you are somebody who's used to lifting heavy loads, as a power lifter, this might potentially, in terms of the supply, make things less stressful for you injury-wise, and enhance longevity in the sport. That was something that came up in the interviews. We did some interviews with coaches and some elite powerlifters as well, and that's something that they mentioned too. They said that I've trained like this to avoid getting injured at times where I couldn't handle more. But yeah, that's that. I hope I somewhat covered it.
Yeah, so I think you're talking about basically knowing your limitations. So if you're a beginner lifter, then just focus on the basics, just training regularly, using good technique, and then once you're confident, then looking at something like a minimum effective dose. And then if you're already intermediate or advanced, the minimum effective dose can actually help you reduce the risk of injury, because you're kind of training within yourself more often. Would that be fair to say?
Yeah, it's like selecting the type of minimum dose approach, because, excuse me, I need to open the window while I talk. The sun has been blasting me for the past 10 minutes.
The sun in England.
So there is. It's the national sun apparently. So, but yeah, that's a very fair comment, and we're back to that weather. But it's not that a beginner or the early intermediate cannot train with the minimum dose approach. Is that if they see this particular paper, which was focused on powerlifters and using heavy load training, using that specific approach may not be ideal. But the literature review of the project, which was published separately as a systematic review and meta-analysis, found that you can also make progress as a recreational lifter using sets of 6 to 12 repetitions and potentially not using as heavy loads as the powerlifters in the study. That's where I was getting at. So if if you're somebody who's watching this and you read the paper, and you see the singles and all the stuff that we use with the powerlifters, it's potentially worth that you try an approach like the one seen in the literature review of the project if you don't have experience in handling such heavy loads. That's all. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Follow the kind of the evidence, really. Follow what's been done before. Yeah. And also then just keep in mind that the study was done with the elite powerlifters and elite coaches. So just keep that in mind and kind of gauge what you're going to do based on your own experience as well. Yeah. All right, PAK. So this has been amazing. Like, you've given me so much of your time. Is there anything that we didn't go over? Anything you want to mention? Anything coming up that you're doing?
We do have a few projects in the works at the moment, and potentially some work looking at powerlifters again, and potentially bodybuilders and the use of deloads and in those populations. But no, it's been a pleasure being on. I enjoyed talking. I like talking a lot, as you probably understood. Thanks for having me. And if anybody wants to reach me, they can do so on, I'm mostly on Instagram at Polkarots, POLKAROTS. And if anybody has any questions about our research or whatever, feel free to hit me up.
Brilliant. Yeah. Thanks very much. And I'll attach all your info when I post this up, the studies and stuff like that. So if anyone wants to read more, I would recommend anyone interested in strength training read the study. It's something that you're going to use at some point in your life if you strength train for life, whether you realize it or not. So you might as well learn from the best and read the study. So that is it. Thanks very much, PAK.
Thank you.